Welcome to Sweetcast. This is Clint, and I've got another script critique for you. I'm trying to make these look a little bit better. I made the script a little bit better, so I'm hoping you can see the script itself a little bit better and be able to read it a little bit. I would love some feedback on how to make these more interesting. I'm going to try to be a little bit more snappy with it, so any feedback you can give me would help. So the story we're looking at, this is the same script that we looked at last time. This is taking place in the 1920s, and I picked a scene with a lot of dialogue and with no captions. And so yeah, we're going to look at that dialogue and see how it goes. So first we've got a 5-panel page, much like last time. And in panel 1, we've got our protagonist, Webb. He's walking toward us down the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, looking at the ground to avoid being noticed. The boys are laughing in the background. Ahead of Webb is a food cart like this. Okay, and again with the link in a food cart. The vendor is giving a hot dog to a man. Okay, so the boys, they were in on the last page and the last scene, so that's sort of giving us a nice scene transition. It's letting us know that the scene before we saw the boys through the window, and now he's outside and the boys are still there. So we've changed locations, but it's giving the reader a cue that not much time has passed. So that's okay, but just to clarify, that's what the boys are doing. And the narrator, we've got a voiceover here. This is again another way to make the scene transition smooth. My father was a dry, and they're talking about the prohibition in the scene before, and so this is actually nice. I like the concept of this panel because it's a nice way to transition from the last scene to this scene. So far, so good. Panel 2. Webb stops in front of the hot dog stand. He looks at the cart and searches through his pockets. And then the vendor says, "Get your Red Hots, 2 cents." Okay, so we can see, I think this is okay. I'm feeling a lot better about this page than I did about the last one. He can't afford 2 cents, okay? Panel 3 will reinforce that. Close up on Webb's open palm. He has 1 penny and a little broken bolt from the flying contraption. And yeah, again, you'd have to read the whole script, but the flying machine that broke in our last video, he kept a broken bolt from it as sort of a reminder. So I'm liking this page so much better than the last one because it's showing us a lot without having to tell us it. So he's poor, and this failure that he had earlier, it is hanging over his head. It's haunting him. And then off panel we have Sylvia speaking. This is her first time entering the story. Off panel, she says, "Mason, I'd heard you were back." Panel 4, we see Webb standing on the sidewalk by the food cart. He's looking to the street where Sylvia is looking out from the back seat of a Model T taxi cab. She is dressed in stylish clothes, including long gloves and a flapper girl hat with lace and feathers. Side note, when I was doing the research for this, I wrote this probably 6 years ago, I think 7 years ago, maybe. And I really got into the hats, and I thought, man, that would be awesome to do a comic with a lot of these old school hats. They were just really interesting, I thought. So yeah, he's looking over to see Sylvia. She's in the car looking at him. Sylvia says, "Never expected to see your mug here after that business in Paris." Webb replies, "I was acquitted of all charges. There's no sense in hiding." Sylvia again, "And there's no sense in making a scene. For goodness sakes, Mason, I'm your little sister, not a lawyer. Get in the cab." Again, I'm feeling a lot better about this, and you'll notice in writing there's sort of the old Mark Twain kind of thing where people are speaking a certain way, where he'll misspell words or say them differently. He really messes with the spelling of a word in order to convey the accent. That is it's not that is has passed. So don't do that in your dialogue. And I could show some more examples there. You can convey accents and sort of give people a feeling of the time period without misspelling words. It's actually very disruptive when you're reading a comic to try and make sense of the spelling. So use real spelling, but choose and build your sentences in a certain way so that it sounds like the accent you're trying to convey. This is not the best example of that, but I can definitely see some of it happening. So panel 5. Webb is standing on the curb holding an open taxi door by the handle and glancing back at the food cart. So we're hopefully being seen that he's getting into the cab, he's listening to his sister, but he's still looking back at the food cart, he's hungry. Sylvia speaks. I hope you consider yourself lucky, Mason. I've read all the horrible things they've said about you, and I've decided you've been punished enough. I've decided to forgive you. Okay, so that's okay, but as you read it out loud, and this is important when you're writing dialogue, read it out loud. I've got the word decided twice, and that's no good. It doesn't work. So I might say, I've read all of the horrible things they said about you, and I've decided you've been punished enough. Maybe I would say, I'm ready to forgive you. And that's enough of a change that it just sounds better. So we'll read that again out loud. I hope you consider yourself lucky, Mason. I've read all the horrible things they've said about you, and I've decided you've been punished enough. I am ready to forgive you. I'll make sure to correct that I've to an I'm. I'm ready to forgive you. Okay, so this is actually not bad dialogue now that I've changed that, because it's showing us a couple things. Sylvia is kind of a jokester. She even in Mason's lowest point here, she's not above of teasing him. So Webb says, you've decided to forgive me. And that's the end of the page. So it goes into the conversation more. I'm going to see, let's look at this next page. Okay, page 8, we've got another 5 panels, and this is more dialogue. So I think we're hitting on the same kind of thread here. So panel 1, we're looking into the back seat. The driver has a stiff expression, but is glancing over his shoulder. Webb looks annoyed as he sits beside Sylvia. He's looking directly at her. Sylvia looks ahead at the driver. She is smug and comfortable. Okay, I noticed that as I was writing this draft, my panel descriptions are getting tighter, and that's better. I think this could still be, it could be a little bit better. But we'll get back to the dialogue. Webb says, was it me who stopped writing? Was it me who was absent from Father's funeral? Sylvia, 86 Bedford Street, please. So she's just ignoring him and speaking to the driver. Yes, ma'am, says the driver. Webb, was it I who ran off with that louse? Sylvia, you mean Charlie. Webb, no, I mean louse. Okay, so there's a lot of dialogue here, but it's snappy. I'm liking this so much better than the last page. It's nice and snappy. We're seeing that Sylvia is really not concerned with what Webb is saying. Webb's kind of upset. Sylvia's not really bothered too much about it. And we're also getting the characters defining each other. And that's really important. You don't want a character to define themselves and to tell you, well, how they think or feel. You want another character to do that. So Webb told us, he said, was it me who was absent from Father's funeral? So he's telling us that Sylvia she didn't go to her father's funeral. That tells us something about Sylvia. And Webb's done that for us. He's given us that definition of Sylvia. And Sylvia is ignoring him. She doesn't seem to care. We're also learning that Webb does not approve of Charlie, that louse. Okay, we'll go to panel 2. Sylvia leans in closely to Webb. She remains calm and turns her nose up to him. Webb scowls. Sylvia says, well, that louse has made your little sister a very rich gal, And to prove I've forgiven you for refusing to take me with you on your European soiree, I'm going to give you a job. Webb. I'm not going to bootleg for Charlie. Panel 3. Close-up of Sylvia as she is smiling slyly. Sylvia. I thought you might say that. You've always had to learn the hard way. Panel 4. Close-up. Webb and Sylvia are almost nose to nose. She looks delighted. He looks angry. You always believed father... Excuse me. Sylvia says. You always believed father's lectures. Now you're all balled up about an honest job. Careful, Webb says. Sylvia speaks again. Well, I've got an honest job for you. Just so happens that Charlie has a cousin living upstate that needs a fix-it guy. It's a clean living, but the town is small enough to drive even you to bootlegging. All right, so I just wanted to stop here for a minute and point out some of the word choices. Again, I'm feeling better about this dialogue than the last page. But you can see in the dialogue, there are things like, let's see, now you're all balled up. So that's a term that you wouldn't hear now. That's going to color it and let you know that this is happening in another time. This is historical fiction. Bootlegging, that term comes up. And Sylvia sort of has these almost run-on sentences of ideas. And I think the intent was, and I'm not sure if that works 100%, could be a little bit better, but just to give you a sense of those old-timey movies where everybody talks so fast, and, you know, almost like Gilmore Girls, if you've watched that, but the really quick, snappy, biting kind of sentences. So I think I can see where it was working. It would probably be a little bit better, maybe emphasize that a little bit, but that's how you approach writing and portraying, you know, a certain kind of voice without misspelling words for emphasis. So last panel here, panel 5. We're looking down at the taxi cab as it drives through the streets of New York. The streets are busy with people. Are cars and merchants? I'm thinking that was supposed to be an end. Busy with people, with cars and merchants. And if you've looked at pictures from New York City in the streets in like 1920, things were pretty wild and busy. There were just cars everywhere, and yeah, it was a kind of a mess. Webb says, and what happens when Charlie's cousins find out about Paris? Sylvia, that's the best part, Mason. It's the printing press that needs fixing. The whole town has been without news for months. They've never heard of the infamous imbecile. And that's just some background. That's what the news has been calling him. It's been all the papers. He's imbecile. Webb says, I have to think about it. Sylvia, first take the jog, Mason, then think about it. In a month or so, you'll realize that bootlegging isn't so bad. You'll see. Okay, so overall, I'm happier with this scene. It might have made more sense if I had showed you the pages before, you know, sort of between the first scene we looked over to this page. It's definitely better. Dialogue, I think, could be cleaned up a little bit more. I always am hesitant to stuff in too many word balloons into one page or one panel. Now, I think this is okay. Sylvia in panel 2 here has got a little bit going on. They've got some back and forth. There's quite a bit. However, visually, there's not a lot being shown. So having readers being able to focus on facial expressions and reading the dialogue, I think that's good. You don't want to have too many things that you're expecting your reader to know at the same time. So I think overall this is better, for sure. It's better. Could be tightened up a little bit more. But let me know what you think. I would like to go over this issue a lot more. There's more pages to go over, more problems. Let me know what you would do to make this dialogue better. How would you clean up the page a little bit? And of course, please, I could really use your support. If you like this content, like and subscribe. And as always, if you have a comic script that you would like me to review here on Sweetcast, please email me at sweetcast@mail.com, and I will read over it and give you some feedback myself. And we'll go over something like a page or some kind of a point over here on the channel together. And I will see you next time. Thanks.